So the two main themes in grade 9 art history is how people are shown from prehistoric times to the Roman Empire. And the other one, it talks about the development of architecture. So just a reminder, I always like to show a map and so to give context. So again, we are talking about this area around the Mediterranean, and we are going to look at Stonehenge is from England. It's located right over here. We're going to the one Pont du Gard is in France here. Most of the stuff we're going to look at is here in Greece, and the last stuff we're going to look at is in Italy right here. So starting back in the, way back when we're looking at architecture, Stonehenge is the most famous example of a stone circle. And understand, there's tons of stone circles. It just happens to be the one that became famous. And we look at it because it's an early example of post and lintel architecture. And all that means is when you have the vertical things are the posts, and the horizontal part is called the lintel. So most of your houses are post and lintel architecture. If you look at a doorway, that is post and lintel architecture. So this is on the early systems. From then we move on to Egypt. And of course, when we think of Egyptian architecture, it's all about the pyramids. And so as I said, usually we would talk about the pyramids and the mummies. But make sure that you understand that that's not what their temples look like. The pyramids were burial sites for famous people. The main architecture for their temples were post and lintel. So the columns, in this case, this is what Egyptian columns traditionally look like, are the posts, and of course the horizontal part, sorry, is the lintel. So moving on, we go to Greece. And remember, the Greek architecture, we're leading up to the classical period. Exactly what happened when we looked at the development of people. The sculptures got better and better and better until they were the greatest level that could be achieved in depicting people in sculpture. And kind of the same thing happens in architecture with the post and lintel systems. So this is a restoration of the most famous building, the Parthenon, and I just wanted to show it to you because we tend to think of everything in art history as being beige, and that's not true. It was all painted, and so much of the stuff from art history was painted. You can see here, this is what it would have actually looked like. So what happened is the Greeks start to organize the post and lintel system, and they try to go, how perfect can we make it? It's that idea of perfecting every time you do something. So they created a system called orders, where there's three different types of buildings, and the easiest way to tell them apart is to look at the columns. So the first one is Doric, and it's got this square top on it. It kind of looks like a marshmallow been schmucked up there, and it sits right on the floor. The other one is Ionic. They tend to be more slender. They've got a pretty base on the bottom. And the curly cues at the top are actually a scroll. So think about if you roll up a piece of paper, how they used to read announcements. That's what you're looking at up here. And Corinthian, they're the schmancier ones. They have leaves of the acanthus plant on the top. And they were used on really important buildings, like the Temple of Zeus would have something like Corinthian leaves on it. So I just wanted to show you a couple photographs that I took. We've been very fortunate at ENSS. We travel to Greece and Italy every couple years. In fact, 2021 March break trip is going to Greece and Italy and going to all these sites that we're looking at. So this is a photo that I took last time I was in Athens, and I just thought it was interesting because it just reminds you columns are not one big piece. They're little pieces that are piled on top of each other. So this shot shows that really well. I also took this picture in the town of Olympia, where the original Olympics were held, and this shows a column that used to be standing here and then has fallen over. So you can actually see the individual little pieces, and you can see there's a hole right there. Here's the one closest up. That hole in the middle, there would have been a metal pin in there to hold them all up. Okay, so the most important site in the development of post-lintel architecture is in Athens, Greece, and this is right downtown Athens. There's this big hill called the Acropolis. and we're going to look at just three of the buildings on it. So the first one is right here. This is the little temple of Nike, and this is what the Parthenon looks like today, and that's the last one over there, the Erechtheion. So it's important to understand, so a temple, right, is where you honor the deity that you're basically kissing up to. And at this time in history, there was just, the Greeks were all always fighting with each other, the different regions. So it was really important who you built temples to. So this little cute little temple here is to Nike, and Nike is the goddess of victory. That's where the running shoes get their names from. And so that little the statue that we looked at of Nike reaching down to fasten her sandals, that was from right here. That came off of this wall. So what happens is you want to, give a temple to Nike because you want to be victorious when you go to war. And this is an Ionic temple. So again, it's got the little curly cues at the top, the more slender columns. And then you walk, these are all the crowds, you walk up through this building, and when you come out the other side, ta-da, this is the Parthenon. So the Parthenon was considered to be the greatest achievement in post-Elemental architecture because they purposely did a lot of stuff to try to make it the best building ever. So some of the things they did is, the floor isn't flat, it's actually curved. So that just helps to give an optical illusion of kind of being bigger or greater than it actually is. The other thing that's happened, the columns are actually closer on the corners and they're wider apart in the middle. And think about perspective. Think about things get smaller as they get farther away. So it kind of creates an optical illusion of it being kind of bigger than it actually is. They also, the columns, they are not straight up and down. You notice that they kind of get wider right here in the middle, and then they get a little skinnier up at the top. And this idea of this kind of wideness in the middle is almost like the muscles. It's almost like, the human quality of holding up the roof. The other thing that happens is the columns all slant in a bit. They are not straight up and down. The Acropolis has been under construction for a long time as they try to fix all the issues that have happened due to earthquakes and acid rain. So the nice part about having scaffolding up, though, is when you see that the scaffolding is perfectly straight up and down, it really allows you to see, oh yeah, they do go in at the top. They aren't straight up and down. And then on this picture, it's really easy to see that the ones in the corner are closer together. Than as they start to go, they get wider apart towards the middle. So this, again, just kind of another picture of what they think the Parthenon would have originally looked like when it was painted. And so the idea of Doric architecture, I already mentioned the kind of muscle kind of idea. It represents the traditional, stereotypical male attributes, the strength, not all the pretty curls and stuff, the big square top. And then across from it, this is the Erechtheion, and it's the Ionic temple, and the Ionic temple represents more like, again, traditional, stereotypical female kind of attributes. So when you look at that building, right here, this is what it looks like today. You can see it's got the tall, more slender columns. They're prettier at the bottom. They've got the curls on the top, so that's how you know it's Ionic. But of course, what it's really famous for is this part right here, and that is the maiden porch. And if that looks familiar, it's because that's the picture that's the top of the website for this class. So this is kind of considered like the ultimate. So each one of those sculptures is called a caryatid. And this kind of takes that idea of human attributes in architecture and just raises it to the next level. And it's like, instead of like columns sort of having attributes, why don't we just make the columns actual people? And when you look at this, you can tell that it's a late classical because, again, the proportions are all cool, the hair is all there, and they're messing around with the drapery and trying to work on that, which is the period we looked at when we looked at like Nike Samothrace. And so the Greeks, once again, it's considered classical architecture always means the height and that occurred in Greece. So what happens is Rome, right, which is Italy. So remember, this is Greece right here, and Italy is right beside it right here. And that little white dot there, that's the city of Rome. Well, the Roman army starts to expand, and they start to take over all the places around them. And well, one of the first places they take over is Greece. And so what happens is the art keeps being produced by Greek artists, but the Romans kind of take what the Greeks have done and expand upon that. And this is actually a big wall in downtown Rome that I took a photo of. And here's the last photo. So remember that little white dot that was right there? Well, now look what's happened. The Roman army has expanded. It's up here. It's France and Italy and Spain. It's taken over England, all of northern Africa, all over in this area here. So this is important to note because when you travel through Europe, you see Roman stuff all over the place. I mean, you can go in Paris and you can see stuff that was built by the Romans. And the Romans do not care about pretty. The Greeks were all into the pretty. The Romans, they care about the function. They want bigger and they want better. They need to be able to build roads. In fact, most of the major roads in Europe date back to the Roman army moving. They need to get bridges, in order to get into what is now Germany. They had to build, the first huge bridge to get across that water. So they start to look at architecture, and this idea of post and lintel only works for so long because as you start to separate these posts to get inside spaces, well, gravity is going to cause the lintel to break. So every time you build something, you have to have like gazillions of posts in order to support that lintel. And that's not always cool, especially when you want to go inside of buildings. So what they start to do is they figure out this. So instead of gravity, when gravity goes straight down, like in post and lintel, that's a problem. But when you start using arches, that changes everything because gravity starts going around and the gravity goes into the corners. So when you switch from a flat top to a rounded top, you can start building bigger and better things. So the Romans didn't invent this idea. So this is a Greek arch, and so the Greeks used arches too, but they were for like little things. This is the entranceway to the original stadium at Olympia for the Olympics. These are ENSS students. This was the original starting line. So again, the idea, you saw that column at the same spot that was all fallen over, right? The post and lintel architecture didn't survive the earthquakes, but you notice the arch did. It's a much stronger form. So they start to build things like this. So this is the Pont du Gard, and it's actually not a bridge, it's an aqueduct. So aqua means water. This whole thing is to get water from this side of this valley across to this side. And the duct is up here. There's just a channel that goes there. And because they're using these giant arches, they're huge. So a person, so if I took even the arrow of my cursor, that's how tall a person would be standing on that platform. This thing is massive. And again, it's in the south of France because that's where the Roman army expanded to. Of course, the most famous probably building for the Romans that you probably know of is the Colosseum. And you notice it's all got arches, except, whoa, what are these? Those are Doric columns all in the bottom row, Ionic columns on the middle row, and Corinthian columns on the top row. And please note, they're not doing anything structurally. This is made from arches, and they've just stuck the Greek stuff on to make it look pretty. The Greeks, when they made big stadiums, they couldn't do it in the city. So this is the theater at Epidaurus in Greece. It's a super cool place to visit. But it's nowhere near the city because in order to build large complexes, they had to go out and find hills, and they had to build into the side of hills. And there's a lot of stuff about ancient architecture that we do not have the knowledge. I mean, you kind of think of modern day being, oh, we know everything, but this is one of those places. So that's actually a student of ENSS right down there. And this is one of the coolest places to visit because she can whisper really low and we can hear her way up here in the top row. The acoustics of this theater are absolutely perfect. Anyone standing in this middle area here, even if they whisper, can be heard way up here. And we actually do not know how they've done it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, of course, the advantage of the Romans is two things. First of all, they're using arches, so you can build things bigger. The other thing they figured out was concrete. So where the Greeks were using marble for almost everything, marble's hard to get, it's heavy, concrete's easy, right? You can just make concrete wherever you want. You can use heavy rocks or you can use light rocks. But the real secret that the Romans figure out is they put volcanic ash inside their concrete, and there's something about that volcanic ash that makes it really durable and is one of the reasons why so much Roman stuff still survives to this day. So, of course, this Colosseum is the most famous building, and the last one we're going to look at, and so this one's in downtown Rome, and so is this, and this is called the Pantheon. So, if you look at this, well, wait a minute, the front of it just looks like a Greek temple. Here's the columns, here's that triangle part, you see at the part of those, and if you look, it's almost like, wow, like what's it doing there? It's just a fake front, right? Because the kind of Roman important part is back here. It is a huge dome. This was the largest dome that was created in antiquity. So again, the Romans, they come up with the new, the bigger, the better stuff, but they're like, yeah, let's just use that Greek stuff to make it pretty. So if you look at a diagram of this, you can see that's what it is. It's this giant dome. It's actually a perfect hemisphere. That means you can stick a perfect sphere right inside of it, and the height and the width would be the same. And then here's just the kind of the Greek looking part at the front to make it look pretty. And if you look inside of it, the word pantheon kind of means like all gods, and that's what it is. It's for the seven planetary gods. And so you can see here's the largest dome in antiquity. They had to put a little hole in the top called the oculus, just because they were worried about gravity. And then you can see where they've got these little niches all the way around. Once again, they go back to Greek style of architecture and they put the little columns on and they make the Greek statues. So when we're looking at the development of architecture, we start with post and lintel, but gravity becomes a problem. And then we start to use arches, and then we get to domes. And if you look at this picture right here, you can see the difference. The gravity, so they've got a hole here, and then it's really thin, and then it just gets thicker, 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 until down in this corner, you just make everything really thick and heavy so that the gravity won't affect this part. And then that's very different from post and lintel, where you can only go so big without the gravity causing everything to collapse.